Welcome to the In-Rim Podcast, where we discuss the law for real estate investors. Andy and Sean are both attorneys. Nothing said in this discussion should be considered legal advice. We're simply providing information and education. You should consult with an attorney in your state regarding any specific legal issue that you may have. Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. Today, our topic is building a client-centric real estate business. I'm Andy Fowler, and I'm here with Sean St. Clair. If you're new to the show, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. You can find us on Facebook, and you can find us on YouTube. On YouTube, we are at InRem Podcast. That's at InRem Podcast. Again, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe. That helps us provide you more and better content. With that, we're going to go to Sean, who has our legal update.
Thank you, Andy. Well, since today we're talking about a client-centric business, I thought I would deviate a little bit from real estate and talk about buying and selling businesses. This is kind of part two of what I spoke about last week, which is the different ways that you can buy a business, whether that's, through an asset purchase agreement or a membership interest purchase agreement. So today's topic, though, I want to talk about if you do decide to purchase a business, how can you structure the purchase price for that business? And in particular, how can you buy a business with very small amount out of pocket, meaning you basically buy it using seller carryback financing, similar to what you can do with real estate, where you can go and approach a seller and negotiate with the seller that they actually become the lender on the real estate. You can do that the same with the business. So you go to the business, for example, that you're buying the assets from, and you say, okay, I will execute a purchase contract and I will pay you X amount of dollars, but the rest of the purchase price will be by seller carryback. So in order to evidence the seller carryback, or the amounts that I'm going to owe, I'm going to execute a promissory note, deliver that to the company that's selling the assets, and then I'm going to allow the company to secure the repayment of that obligation by the assets being transferred. So basically, if I don't pay as the new owner of the business or new owner of the assets of the business, if I don't pay, then the seller, who is now the lender, can then come back in via that security agreement and basically take over the assets or take over the business and start operating the business. Or if it's tangible assets, they can take those tangible assets and they can sell those assets and apply the sales proceeds towards the amount of the debt. Now, if you're going to purchase, because we talked about last week, the difference between buying assets and buying a membership interest. So let's say I go in and say, okay, I'm going to purchase the business as a going concern. I'm not going to just purchase assets of the business, but I want to basically step in and we're going to keep the EIN number. We're going to keep the checking account. We're going to keep, our contracts with vendors and clients in place. We're not going to change the names on anything. And I'm going to instead buy the actual ownership of the business. I'm going to buy the membership interest, or in the case of a corporation, I'm going to buy the stock of the corporation. I'm going to go in and do that. You can still do that on seller carryback. And so the way that would look is you would go in and purchase it. You would, the membership interest, you would execute a promissory note in favor of the prior owner. And then in order to secure the assets of the business, like you did in the asset purchase transaction, you would actually, or the seller would require, or should require, that the company execute a guarantee of that payment. And so the business, the LLC that is the going concern, it actually executes a guarantee saying, yeah, the company is going to pay. If the new owner doesn't fulfill its obligations to the old owner, the company will step in and fulfill those obligations on their behalf. And if we're not able to, if the company and the new owner is not able to, then there's a security agreement against the assets of that business, so that if there's a default, the prior owner, seller's now lender, can step in and basically take over the company, take over the assets, take over the company, operate the company, and basically use the company, hopefully that's still a going concern, for the purpose or benefit of making the loan payments. So just because it's a business, just because it involves tangible property as opposed to real property, doesn't mean that you can't do a seller carryback. You can do a seller carryback. In fact, that's a fairly common way to purchase assets of a business or to purchase ownership of a business, is by doing a seller carryback. And then the thought would be, well, if the business is a going concern, then I can use the income of the business to pay for my purchase of either the ownership of the business or the assets of the business. So something to think about if you're looking for other investment opportunities besides real estate. Hey, businesses are another way to invest and you know, have and grow your assets. You know, if you're successful at going in and purchasing. And a lot of our investor clients who invest in real estate also invest in business, and they do quite well doing so.
Yeah, one thing that I would just add to all of that, if you're going to do any sort of seller carryback on a business, is if you're going to involve the SBA, which is commonly the case. So in that case, the SBA is going to have a first position lien on all the business assets, because you're bringing them in because they're coming in with a big chunk of the money. But oftentimes you'll see still a carryback after the fact of maybe 10% of the remaining purchase price, because there are limits on like SBA financing on how much you can do. So, you know, if you can still carry back either portions of it beyond what the SBA might pay. The thing to note there is your rights and remedies as a secured creditor, in this case, second position to, just like we hear in real estate, first and second position, the same is true with personal property assets, like business assets. There's going to be an order of priority as to lien holders. But if you're behind an agency like the SBA, they vastly restrict your rights and remedies as a second position lien holder. Of course, that's because they don't want you, if they've got $5 million loan to loan on the business and you're owed $100,000 on a carryback, they don't want you to basically shut down the business entirely. But for sure, something to keep in mind with respect to seller carryback of business assets. With that, we're going to get into our topic today, which is building a client-centric real estate business. And with us to discuss that is Jonathan Kaiser. Jonathan is the broker and owner and founding member of Kaiser, a commercial real estate advisory. He's also the author of a book that just a year or two old now. You Don't Have to Be Ruthless to Win: The Art of Badass Selfless Service. So we appreciate, Jonathan, you being here with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
So Jonathan, tell our listeners, this is primarily really a real estate, a show for real estate investors, and Sean and I are attorneys, so we try to give our legal perspective, but we're talking about building a client-centric business. So tell our listeners about you, tell us about Kaiser as a company and your book.
Sure. Well, first of all, that was great advice you just gave. It was interesting to think about doing a seller carryback for a business. It seems like in the right business, that can make a lot of sense. So sure. Thanks for sharing that. So my story is a little unique. I was actually raised a Christian missionary kid. I grew up in Papua New Guinea, and my parents taught me to love and serve. And I thought that was the only way to live. And when we got back from overseas, I had this realization that we were poor, and I didn't like being poor. So I got into commercial real estate sort of accidentally because somebody told me that I could get rich doing it, and I wanted to get rich. And as I got in, I realized, wow, this is a very cutthroat, take no prisoners, ruthless industry. So I became that way because I thought that's what it took to be successful. And I figured my parents had it all wrong. And then about 20 years ago, I went to a conference and a speaker got up and started having a different kind of conversation. He talked about succeeding by helping others succeed. And I was fascinated, and it sounded like my parents. And so I went up afterwards and talked to him about it. And he compared it as the difference between hunting and farming. He said, Jonathan, today you're hunting, and what I'm describing is more of farming, where you nurture relationships over time and they come back in a big way. But you have to play the long game. And I said, well, how long is the long game? He said, well, it'll take you 5 years to really reinvent yourself. And so I decided I was going to do that. It moved and inspired me. So long story short, I threw my old business plan away. I was National Rookie of the Year for Grubb & Ellis and Now all of a sudden I'm out in the community as a kind of a free community concierge, asking everybody one question: what can I do to help you? People thought I'd kind of hit my head. And it was a long, hard 4.5 years, just like they predicted. It took me 4.5 years before my first big referral, where I spent all my time, instead of selling, I spent all my time trying to help other people get what they wanted, whether that was helping their kids get a job, or helping them get more business for their company, or being a connector for them in other ways. And so after 5 years, I started to get these referrals, and that turned into this amazing run where I started to realize that I had stumbled on something that had the opportunity to actually be transformative in an industry. And in an epiphany moment in Sedona, where all good epiphany moments happen, staring up at the mountains, I realized, what if I could create a company that was solely focused on loving and serving people and being successful at the same time. So that moved and inspired me again. And so I decided in that moment that I was going to create a firm. And it's been extraordinary, Andy. It's been extraordinary going from, this kind of big, crazy idea of what if we can change the world, to having a successful company that's built on the principles of success through service, where we don't sell, we help, we serve, we give, and it comes back. And it's just been this amazing run, from being named, industry disruptor by USA Today. I wrote a book about it, hit #1 on the Wall Street Journal list. And so I've spent a lot of time kind of helping other organizations see how they can do this for themselves. Because to me, the real mission is, it's not, hey, if you have a commercial real estate firm, you should build it just like me. No, that's not the point. The point is, if we can do this, if we can show that you can live this way, be this way, do service this way, in arguably one of the most cutthroat industries in the world, I believe it's possible across any industry. So the whole point of the book was to take everything that I had learned to date and say, put this to use in your business. Here's a kind of a how-to guide of how I did it. Take what works for you so that you can create that for yourself in your own enterprise.
Now, in reading the book, one thing that really struck me, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I'm sure you have one. You discussed in the book a realization moment of when being a selfless server goes from being a gimmick to actually being, a marketing gimmick, to actually being something that you're doing because you want to do it. And you discuss a little bit kind of about that realization and your transformation. What was that like in realizing and moving past this just being like a marketing ploy to, this is just who I am and what I'm going to be and what
Yeah, that's a great question. And it kind of gets to the heart of the issue, which is, I don't believe that selfless service can be faked over time. I think you could do it in a short run, but people have really good BS detectors, and they can tell if you're for real or if you're inauthentic. And I believe that authentic selfless service is I think it's essential to long-term sustained success, especially in a service industry. I see so many people that leave, trails of burned bridges behind them. And I think it's just unfortunate. But to the heart of your question, for me, it was not an easy off and on switch, right? You don't just go from being ruthless and then all of a sudden not being ruthless. It was a transition. And a lot of it was around internal self-awareness for me, Andy, because I wasn't self-aware enough to realize how selfish I'd become. So even though I was doing things tactically to do it in a way that was following this new strategy, and I enjoyed helping people, underneath it all was still this sort of manipulation of, and I think this is how most people play it, right? The people that act like they're the ones that are helping the most often are ones that are just gaming the reciprocation, paradigm, right? Just understanding that at some point the universe cannot handle an imbalance. The more you give, the more you get, which is fine. I mean, it underpins what we do. So it's not saying, hey, be naive to the fact. No, my message to business leaders is, This stuff works, and ultimately it comes back to you. So do it because it's practical. But also in that, if there's not a purity, right? I used to keep track. I used to be like, okay, so I helped this person. They haven't helped me back. Screw them. That's the manipulation part, right? It's the freedom of it is helping everyone. Now again, it has to be a choice, right? So no one can ever mandate that you help someone. Selfless service by its very nature has to be your own choice. But within that choice, whoever I choose to serve, it's not always just going to be someone that I assume is going to help me back. Like, I believe in spreading the service wide and far. And through that, I have gotten some of the greatest referrals from people that I never would have thought in a million years could have helped me. So the scarcity mindset is more manipulative. Like, I'll just help this person, and if they don't help me back, that quid pro quo is broken, and I don't want them. So this is a broader perspective, but there's also a strategy involved, right? Like, I can sit on the street corner and I can just ask everybody that walked past me, how can I help you? And I can help them. That would probably be a cool strategy in life, but that's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is all the people that you would normally interface with on a day-to-day basis, whoever your partners, whoever your potential clients are, your people. What if all of your interactions focused and centered around what could you do to help them succeed? What's in it for them? What if you walked around with instead of what's in it for me on your forehead, what's in it for them? And that's what I'm really describing. And at the end of the day, I think that people can sniff out if that's inauthentic. So long story short, my journey was going from tactically starting to do the things that led to where I'm at today, and having a change of heart in the middle where I realized in a moment of coaching with my coach that I was behaving I was still manipulating. And when I saw that, it was so ugly that I decided that I was just going to help without any expectation of return. And it was when that actually happened, when that clicked for me, and I stopped keeping track, and I stopped thinking about it, and I stopped worrying about, am I doing too much for this person? Or are they not giving back? And I just said, I'm just going to love and serve. That's when it really started to take off for me success-wise.
So again, our topic here is a client-centered business, and we'll get into ideas about of what that looks like, what that's looked like for you in building a client-centric business. But it seems to me, and what you're saying is, it first begins with you. The transformation has to begin with you, or it's not happening at all. That seems to be the case. Would you agree?
I would. We've come up with our own little kind of formula for it. We call it reinvention from the inside out. So it's a 3-step process, right? Like Gandhi says, you got to be the change you want to see in the world. So it starts with you, and then as you transform yourself, then you transform your organization. So I talk a lot to existing businesses and say, okay, Jonathan, the advantage you had is you were able to start from scratch and build it the way you wanted. We're an existing business, and now we're wanting to do more transformational work. Well, that's possible too. But again, I believe a fish rots from the head, right? I use that term a lot. I believe that it starts with you as a leader, and no one's going to follow these principles that you have on a wall unless you're actually doing it, if you're actually leading it. So the hardest part about having a selfless service culture is you as the leader have to become selfless service. And that's easier said than done. So that's self-reinvention. And then you set up your culture within the organization, whether it's a transformation of existing or a new, where those are the pillars. Those are the pieces that work. We have 15 core operating principles that we built our firm on, and all of it kind of ties together to create this actionable selfless service philosophy. And then, and only then, I believe, can you provide that kind of experience to the marketplace, right? So it's a 3-step: yourself, the company culture, and then your community, clients, partners, vendors, etc.
So let's talk about building a client-centric business. And I think under as we were reading under your logo, it says relentless client champion. What is that? What does that mean to you? And what does building a business, in service to a client look like?
Yeah, I think if you asked anybody in business, and you said, hey, do you think your business is client centric? I think most people would say, oh yes, of course. Like we take good care of our clients. It's not like some, oh wow, Jonathan, you came up with a great, mind-blowing concept to actually take care of the people that pay your bills. No, I don't think it's that. What I think it is, I think it's the next level, right? It's looking out for them where they believe. Like when I do a lot of speeches, I'll start with a little gimmick and I'll say, okay, everybody, imagine in your head, don't say anything, just imagine in your head the person in your life that you trust the most, right? The most trusted person in your life that you would trust with your life. Now raise your hand if that's your commercial real estate broker. And everybody just breaks into laughter, right? Because it's laughable that would be the person, right? Of course it's not the person. We aim to change that. So we want to be that most trusted person where they know that no matter what, we got their back. If a deal's not good for them, we tell them, don't do this deal, right? If they need anything, any contact in the community, any referral, anything, sometimes people just call me to say, hey, I just want to chat through something. Could you just, guys, bend your ear for a minute? So it's like being that trusted source and moving upstream in the life cycle of client service delivery from, if you work at Nordstrom and you sell shoes, somebody comes in for shoes, you help them find the right pair of shoes. You could say that's customer service, and they're right. But it's layers above that. It's trying to figure out what at their core they need. I try to have really real conversations with people where I try to come up with what is it that they really need that's beyond just the services that I can provide. Sometimes it's a good book. Sometimes it's another connection. So I love to help single people find a partner. Like it's finding the things that are going to make the most material impact in their life and then trying to do those and trying to have that be the focus, and also being that trustworthy partner where they never have to question that what you're telling them is the truth. And I think that's tough in our business, right? Because brokers are supposed to be brokers, and everybody kind of assumes that by being a broker, you're sort of like living in the half-truths. And I think that that's true, but I also think that it's not necessary. I think that I can get a better deal for people because they know that when I say something, it's true, versus I'm just being a broker. I feel like by being honest and by being true to what you say, you don't actually undermine your negotiating leverage. You enhance it, because of course we're still strategic and smart and play the game. But when I say something, people don't have to wonder, is that guy telling the truth or is he lying? Because I don't lie, right? So that gives me the power I need in that moment to be successful. So it's like, it's taking all the assumptions that you assume about business. Like you could come up with your own about the law firm world. You could come up with ones about banking. You can come up with ones about venture funds. They all have their characteristics that enough people believe them because they've had experiences that prove them to be true. Nothing more prevalent than brokers being cutthroat and ruthless. So the whole point of the name of my book, You Don't Have to Be Ruthless to Win, is like, what if, just as a possibility, you could have a relationship with someone who cared so much about you and your business, and yeah, they helped you on the real estate side because that's our expertise, but really you have a strategic partner that's there to help you throughout the life cycle of whatever your needs may be. And sometimes it's like they get out of a job. When people lose their job or get laid off or whatever, most people ignore them because now they're not in a position where that person can hire them. That's my favorite time to love on people. Let's help you find your next gig, and let's set it up. You create the most extraordinary relationships with people when you help them in a time of need. So it's not being transactional. It's not being, you need this, I'm going to provide you this, and I'm going to do a good job. That's the baseline. That's the table stakes, right? If you're really going to be over the top, you have to be thinking, and you have to be good at identifying what those things are, which means you have to be a good listener. You have to be a good question asker. You have to be like willing to go into uncomfortable spaces where most people wouldn't tread, like getting into people's life stories without just hearing their normal blah, 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 blah. It's like,
well, I think even in your book, there was at one point you mentioned not going, I thought this was, I had never heard this. I thought it was a brilliant idea, but going into a meeting without having done a ton of, research, background research about the person, which is of course what we all want to do initially, because that makes us look like we're on top of things. But you end up absorbing a bunch of surface level stuff, which ends up kind of, it seems to me, blinding you from doing what you're talking about, which is sitting down, listening, and learning about what they are as a person in a company.
Yeah, and that is it's a great comment, because I get a lot of questions about that comment in particular, where it's like, I'm not suggesting being irresponsible in meetings. If you have to prepare for things, be prepared. But what I'm suggesting is that what I see most in most kind of client facing sales type of, service roles, is I see people being like showing up, having prepared, and spending the time trying to figure out how to demonstrate that they're prepared and regurgitate the stuff they found online to sell them. And then they miss the whole story because they already have preconceived idea. They're trying to weave in all the pieces to show off. That's not being present. Being present is being there in the moment and being so absorbed with that other individual that there's nothing else around. You are locked in, and you are fascinated beyond belief with that individual. And that is something I don't see very often. If there was a skill that I have, I think that's it. If there was my top skill, you put me in a meeting with someone, I fall in love with everybody I meet with. It's kind of a joke around the office. Everybody's like, JK never dislikes anyone, because no matter who I sit down with, I fall in love with them. Why? Because I'm in their world and I'm trying to understand them, and I'm looking for the beautiful things about them that make them unique and special, regardless of whether there's an opportunity for me. And I don't think enough people do that. I think very few people spend time with another individual with the sole intent not to sell them, but just to understand and get to know them and find ways to help them. I believe in the power of 3. You read about that in the book. I believe that in any interaction, you should work really, really hard to identify 3 ways that you can help that other person. Sounds so simple, but it's not, because what are things that they're actually going to want? You actually have to probe. You have to find. I love finding the personal ones, right? Ones where they're struggling with something, and I can get them a good book or a good audible book, or make a personal connection, whether that's romantic or otherwise. A lot of people are just lonely, so sometimes the best ways you can help people are just making connections that have nothing to do with monetary benefit. But then the ones that do as well, that's really powerful, right? So if you can combine the personal with the business, and then people leave going, who was that? Like, it's almost uncomfortable for them because they're not used to somebody caring enough to probe, to figure out where the needs are. Like, sometimes it's a little bit of an unsettling experience when people meet with me. At the end of it, they feel loved and appreciated, but it's not the vanilla, let's just regurgitate our crap over here and you regurgitate your crap over here, and we go, oh, let's do stuff together, and then nothing ever happens. Like, that's just not, to me, that's not really, that's squandering an opportunity with another human that you could otherwise have maximized.
Jonathan, this concept of selfless service, a client-centric business, what has that done as far as Kaiser's reputation within the real estate community in general? Meaning, has it strengthened the relationships you have with other brokers, and in particular, landlord brokers?
It's a great question. I would say that in general, when we started, we were the laughing stock, because we were articulating, like, I remember when we were about to go live, we just had our 10-year anniversary. You know that 96% of companies never make it 10 years? Isn't that amazing?
Congratulations. That's a great milestone.
We're in the 4%, man. We're in the 4%.
Awesome.
But I remember when we were launching and I was doing the final review of the website, I was like about to hit send to the web designer to say go live. And I thought, you know what? I better read this. Just find a quiet place and read the entire thing top to bottom. I remember being I was so moved and inspired by the stuff we put in there and the people's testimonies and why they were joining Kaiser and all these things. But I also had this thought of like, oh my gosh, the landlord broker community, they are going to have a heyday with this. They are going to laugh and scoff. Screw it, that's what we're about. Send. And I've never looked back. So it's an interesting question because not everybody is a huge fan of what we're doing, right? There are plenty of people that, one, still don't buy that we're sincere, and I respect that, right? It's easy to be skeptical in an industry where everybody's a slinging snake oil of some kind. So there's plenty of people that just think I'm slinging snake oil, and I have no problem with that because that's appropriate and fair. There are others who respect it, but also don't know how to do it. So then they sort of, just kind of ignore it. And then there's others that like this message resonates with the right people. One of the things that I've noticed about this, as I've built this company, is that my message becomes very, it's like a magnet. It rejects a lot of people and it attracts, in my opinion, the right people. Now, one of the things that's been hard is, and this is a whole aside, so I won't go down the rabbit trail here, but one of the things that I think the hardest thing about a business like ours is as you gain success, people want to join for that versus for the right reasons. And so because I love everyone, I find the greatness in everyone. And so I sit down, I go, this person would be great. And then it turns out that they were, not being authentic about really wanting to come from a place of service, or it was too hard. Because that's fair, right? Hey, it sounds good. Let's try it. Oh my gosh, this is brutal because it is not easy. It is not for the faint of heart. Or number three, I think it takes a certain kind of skill set to be good at it. Like I think you have to have the people skills to be able to have those kind of uncomfortable, honest, authentic conversations with people. Not everybody has that skill. So I've noticed that there are people that are not naturally a good fit. But in general, I would say that most people have sort of a begrudging respect for us. I think in general, they realize that like they know that we play at the highest levels, right? So they're competing with us. So that's the other weird thing about our business, right? We're a tenant firm. We only represent the tenants. So on one hand, all the landlord brokers out there are reaching out to us to make us aware for our clients, because we're the largest tenant rep firm in the state, about all their projects, right? So they're pitching their projects to us on one hand, but on the other hand, they're putting on their other hat and they're going into the same tenants and competing with us to represent those tenants. So there's sort of like it's an interesting dynamic to be sure, but we didn't do it to win a popularity contest, right? We're not doing it we're doing what we believe is right, regardless of what anybody else says. And we put it all out there. So we're also fearless about it. And the right people are attracted to it. I mean, you talk to the people at Kaiser about why they're here and what they're up to. I mean, we are a happy place, right? And it's not for everybody. In fact, it's not for most people. And I like it that way, right? It's just for the few that are willing to be different, because it's hard to be different in an industry where everybody's supposed to kind of be in the same club. We're not in the club. We're outside of the club. We're being different, and we like it being different. And so I don't worry about because the other thing about brokerage is everybody talks trash, right? So a lot of people talk trash, and you can't take it personal because they talk trash about everybody. It just happens they talk trash about you too. But I would say in general, we have really, really good relationships, to summarize, with all of the dominant teams because we do so much work with them. And they know what they can expect from us. They know it's going to be a tougher negotiation because they can't just, force us to fold, but they also know that we're going to be straight with them. So it's an interesting dynamic. Great question.
Yeah. And so I wanted to follow up on that. So talk about how this selfless service to others permeates or impacts your negotiations, right? Because, we think of negotiations as having to be kind of a ruthless endeavor, and maybe it still is, and commercial real estate in general, and tends to be, like you pointed out, ruthless. So how does the selfless service to others, work with negotiations and fairness and honesty and, all of that professionalism in the negotiation process with the other side.
Great, man. You ask great questions. Well, one, going back to Andy's question, we're relentless client champions. So what our clients can expect from us is we are relentless advocates. The reason we only represent tenants is because if you look at the commercial real estate industry, all of the big firms, just follow the money. All of the big firms primarily represent landlords, developers, and real estate investors. And it just flows downstream, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not painting that as like, ooh, how terrible. No. But at the end of the day, if it weren't for the tenant, you wouldn't have any commercial real estate investment, right? So we provide that advocacy for the commercial real estate tenant. We're exclusive advocates because I don't believe you can serve two masters. So trying to do both and trying to put tenants in a building and then also have, it just doesn't work, right? Even with real estate law, there's all kinds of rules around it. So we pick a side and we're ferocious about that side. So part of that means you got to have a negotiating strategy that's authentic, that's transparent, but still does not give the other side an advantage. So we're still at the end of the day playing poker, right? And everything is poker. What we try to do is make the process consistent. So for example, a lot of our work is looking at renewals versus relocations. And every client wants a different thing. So rather than like we'd be weak negotiators if we said, well, we have to be honest. And so we're going to go tell the whole market, well, they really want to renew. Well, no, that's dumb. That's not smart. But we also don't go lie and say, hey, they're never going to renew. What we do is we run a consistent process. So no matter whether you renew or whether you relocate, the process looks the same. And so the market has to respond to that process versus kind of leading with what the intention is. And that's how most tenants get kind of sold under the river, is you have these backline conversations at the big firms where one guy's representing the tenant, the other guy's representing the landlord, and they start to do this, backroom deal that benefits them. And, then the tenant has to swallow it. So for us, it's about, making sure that we set up every negotiation in a way that's going to be favorable to our client, and then being consistent throughout that. And then that in and of itself, it's a process-driven approach. And it's very effective, because half the time our clients want to move and half the time they want to stay and half the time they don't even know, like they don't know until the end result. And so even if we were going to tell somebody, well, they really just want to renew, which would be dumb, they may not at the end of the day. That may end up not being true by running through the process. Like how many times have you said, hey, if I'm going to buy a car, I'm not just going to go into Audi and say, hey, I want that car. How much is it? And I'm not looking at anything else. Like that would be just ignorant, right?
Jonathan, so there's obviously an emphasis, and you've mentioned this a number of times, in being intentional about the clients that you're looking for. So let's start there. You have an idea about what you are, how you want to be. And you mentioned that's not going to be for everybody, and certain clients are going to be attracted to it. But not only are certain clients going to be attracted to it, you're going to find, or you might be intentional about trying to find those clients. And I think one of the things you mentioned in your book is that's one of the reasons why Kaiser doesn't typically do like RFPs. And I thought that was interesting. Explain for the audience what that is and
Sure.
And how that plays into it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we never do, because there's always unique examples, but for the most part, we don't. The way that most businesses awarded is it's sort of like a government procurement process, right? For the big companies is they go through this process, the procurement people get involved, they run a beauty contest. Usually it's about how to maximize, getting the most for the least. And what it doesn't do, it doesn't take into account, it's basically comparing apples to oranges, because what you're describing is taking a bunch of transactional mindseted firms, pitching them against each other to see who's willing to be the most transactional at the most economical cost, versus looking for a partner that can really help you accomplish your objectives. So we look for organizations that want to be aligned with their partners. So there's a lot of opportunities for that. It's why we're so involved with conscious capitalism, right? It's Conscious capitalism is about alignment. It's about making sure that people are doing what's good for the collective versus just for the individual or for the organization. And so for us, our mindset is there's enough business out there. We're not trying to just be the low cost option, because you can't be the low cost option and provide the world's best service. You just can't. It doesn't work. And so for us, we're looking for those organizations that really want a real estate partner to help them. You think about real estate, it's the second or third largest expense for most companies. It's the least flexible, because you can lay off people, but you can't lay off a lease or a building that you own. And over half of corporate bankruptcies involve breaking some kind of lease. So this stuff is material. So for us, we look at it as strategic consultants that are looking for organizations that want to outperform, that want to that don't just want to accept that, you know, this is just a fixed cost, fixed expense, and this is just the rate. Like we believe in outmaneuvering and outperforming the market, and we do it all the time. So for us, it's about, but it takes the right kind of client partner who's really looking for a partner and allows us to really get embedded within the organization versus just be on the kind of receiving end of go find this. We're not space finders. We're not space showers. We do show space as part of what we do, but what we really are is strategic consultants on behalf of organizations, helping them manage cost and risk in a better way around their second or third largest expense, which is corporate real estate.
Now, as you grow a client-centric business, it's one thing if you're just the sole real estate investor and you have an epiphany, which is good enough, and you're like, I'm going to be ruthless about being service-oriented, and that would be great. And I hope all of our kind of solo real estate investors are watching and they want to make that change. But taking that to the next level, which you've done, where you have employees, you have agents working with you. Now we're talking about something that really requires buy-in, because you're not alone anymore. You know, Kaiser isn't just acting on its own anymore. It's got lots of representatives. You explain in your book, you give examples about what it was like in the ruthless industry with real estate brokers, other agents within your own company, trying to find out the deals, poach deals, all that same kind of stuff. How do you build that culture, or begin to build that culture within your company, if it's more than just you, to get that buy-in in order to grow accordingly?
Great question. Well, I think it starts at the beginning, which is you have to establish what your culture is going to be, what your company culture is going to stand for. For us, we did it around 15 core operating principles. Right. And those operating principles truly do dictate how we behave. And that's how we manage. That's how we hire. That's how we fire. So they're embedded. Every meeting starts with them. Talk about examples about how we were or were not them. My favorite thing to do, by the way, is brag about when I screw up, because that's really where the opportunity is. That's where people see the vulnerability and the transparency. But it's an ongoing thing. My coach used to say all the time, you know, Jonathan, you think about culture as a banana, right? It fades quickly, right? It becomes brown quickly. So your job is to consistently and constantly keep, my primary job as leader is to keep the culture alive. And that is easier said than done, because it involves me living it. It involves when the tough decisions, you know, it's easy to go, oh my gosh, Jonathan, that's such a beautiful mindset. Let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. And then the real world hits, and it's like, well, how do I handle this? Like, what do I do in this moment? And if you have this principle-based methodology, you go, well, let's go back to the basics. What do our principles decide? And that's this. And so this is how we're going to act. So keeping that alive, like we have a couple things that maybe I'll use a couple examples so it's not all squishy and unclear. One of my favorite one of the principles is we never punish mistakes. That is unheard of in our industry. Everybody's sitting around waiting for somebody else to make a mistake so they can jump on it, capitalize, and take whatever that created for them. Right? It's all in it for me, and hopefully you trip so I can step on your head as I run by you. Not at our firm, right? At our firm, it's okay, cool. What did you learn from that? Got it. don't repeat it. You know, as long as you're growing, I'm not saying that some person doing the same negligent thing over and over again is allowed at our firm. It is not. But if you make an obvious mistake and you learn from it, that's how we all grow. And unless you're some perfect leader, which I haven't met yet, and I've met a lot of leaders, the only way you became that good leader is by doing the same process yourself. So all of a sudden, you fail your way to the top, learning what doesn't work and just don't quit. And then you're supposed to go hammer people that don't do everything perfect. It makes absolutely no sense. So that's one example of where in that moment, somebody makes a mistake. What's your response, right? How do you handle that? You do it in a way that's consistent with love and service. I want everybody at my firm to feel safe. Safe. I'm not coming after you. I'm not trying to undermine you. I protect you, right? Like you're under the Kaiser protection umbrella, which means I am a ferocious advocate for you. The only way our people are going to be ferocious advocates for their clients are if they feel like leadership is a ferocious advocate for them. Everybody at Kaiser knows I got their back, period.
And if they have a fear of making a mistake, they don't have the confidence to go big and bold and do the kind of things you were hoping they would do when you brought them on, right?
Totally. Think about how most people, that's a great point, Andy. Think about how most people live their lives in business. Looking over their shoulder, covering their ass, just trying to make sure that they don't get punished. It's not a very productive way to empower your people to unlock their potential, right? The only way you're going to unlock people's potential is to give them the freedom to take bold action, which inevitably will lead to mistakes. And guess what? If I'm out in front leading with bold action myself, which I always am, that means who's going to make the most mistakes? Me, right? So how hypocritical that we as leaders cover up our own mistakes and then expect other people to not cover up, punish them if they do, which just tells them I'm going to be better at cover up. Most people are in this, unfortunately, this vicious cycle where the leaders put great words on a wall. Culture is the buzzword. When I started this firm, it wasn't. Today it is, but most of it's inauthentic. Most of it's leaders going to a workshop and, I got to focus on culture. Okay, well then integrity and do the right thing and blah, 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 blah. But they're not actually doing it. They're not actually leading it, and they're not pushing it and permeating their culture with it. So therein lies the risk, is people start to get turned off with the language as soon as they see the hypocrisy that occurs where the leaders say one thing and do another. So again, the hardest part about being a leader is, the term heavy is the crown. It doesn't really apply here because it's not a heaviness, but it is a solemn responsibility that if you're going to lead an organization and you say you're going to stand for something, you better live it. Because as soon as you don't, I hear so many leaders talking about how, we tried to do this and none of my people do it. And the first thing I think is the reason they're not doing it is because you're not doing it, So you're full of crap. Don't blame them. You're the one that's full of crap.
Oh yeah. There was a sportscaster I used to love to listen to. And his thing was always, you are what you do. You can say any amount of things that you want to say, but what you do is what everybody sees.
Yep.
And that's how they know who you are and what you are. And if you're not living it, then yeah, like you said, it's just BS. I'm really interested also. It just seems so simple, but so relevant in today's culture, in building the culture of a business of the kind you're talking about. And you talked about this in your book, but the idea of distractions. And we have so many of them right now. Obviously, the cell phone, the Apple Watch, whatever it is that's dinging your wrist or is making noise in your pocket, or the thing that you have to check in the middle of a meeting, whether it's with a client or a company, is a constant distraction. And I am the first sinner of this kind of thing. So, I'll raise my hand first as being somebody who violates this. But it really makes so much sense in being able to give attention to a client or attention to to your colleagues in a business meeting and bringing the best that you have. What do you do in order to try to cultivate that, ensure that the attention is there, and especially in an environment now where, you know, our law office is kind of a hybrid law office where we have some attorneys that work remotely, some are on, you know, can appear by Teams, and they're doing it virtually. And how in kind of this day and age are you ensuring attention and no distraction?
It's a great question. I think the specifics of my tactics are probably less important as my intention. So my intention is to be focused. My intention is to be undistracted. And then whatever comes out of that is a subset of that intention. Because I could have the best strategies in place, but if that's not really my intention, I'll find a workaround. So for me, like, let's just use this this session right now, this interview, as an example. I do not have my phone on me. It is over on my chair over there. I do not have my email open on my other screen. It is closed, right? I don't have the TV on, even though I have a TV in my office. I don't have a TV on in the background. There's nothing else to pull. I guess somebody could come in or something, but for the most part, I have the locked door, and I'm in my, so I set the environment to that. So when I go to a lunch, for example, what I notice with most people on their lunches, and that's why I don't wear an Apple Watch. Not that you shouldn't wear an Apple Watch, but if you do wear an Apple Watch, I believe you should not have it on buzz. I think it causes you endless distraction, takes you out of the moment constantly, and allows anyone, anywhere to interrupt your state of being. I think that's insane. I would never do that, right? So my phone is always on vibrate, and it's not a heavy vibrate, so it doesn't distract me. Usually I don't even feel it. But when I'm at a lunch, I take it and I put it aside intentionally face down. And I do not look at it unless there's some reason. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, I've got to do something in the moment that's related to the conversation, and so I'll do it. But I think it's having the intention is the most important, because my focus has to be on them. If I'm thinking about, you know, the issue I have with my wife, or the next thing I got to do, or whatever, like, there's also kind of a running joke in my office, which is, if you don't put a reminder for me, I will blow through anything, because I'm so focused in the present. So when you have a busy schedule like me, it becomes interesting, because you have to be present, but you also, once it's time to stop being present there and move to the next thing to be present on, you have to have the right system set up. So everybody's different, right? Knowing yourself and knowing what your processes are and what your proclivities are and where you're most tempted. I never understand how so many business people have their TVs on in the background. I don't even understand that. I could never work that way. It would be, I would do a third of what I could normally do and be distracted the whole time, even if I could justify it. Well, I'm watching the stocks. I got to make sure no, baloney. You know, get 1 or 2 emails a day with a summary, glance at it, and you'll know what you need to know, right? So I think a lot of it is people just like, you know, they don't love their jobs, and so they try to be distracted as much as possible, which just, again, takes them out of, you know, out of action. But to the whole not loving your job, I want our people to love what they do, because if you love something, you're gonna do your best at it. If you love it, you're gonna try at it. And so giving them a safe environment, making sure the roles are right, finding the people that actually love to do what it is you need them to do, that's the magic. And it's not like we're all in a state of flux, right? So I'm not claiming some, you know, high ground of I got it all figured out and you don't. No. But I am saying that is an intention and that is a focus.
Well, and I think it goes right to what we spoke about at the beginning, which was what differentiates you being kind of a selfless listener from it just being a gimmick. And if you're on your phone checking every buzz that you get as they're telling you about their story, you're like, okay, well, I'm just one among the many things you're trying to get through. And it's like I mean,
so rude, you know, like you're trying to have a conversation with somebody and they look at their phone every time it buzzes. To me, it makes me want to stop talking.
Well, yeah. And I think people would stop doing it if everybody just asked themselves, How do you like it when you're at dinner with your kids and you're trying to have a conversation and they're on your phone, right? You usually go ballistic and you get upset about it. Well, now pretend you're the kid and you're the client you're meeting with is mom and dad. Of course they're not, they're going to be more polite about it, but you know, they may not ever call you again over it.
Yeah.
So, well, Jonathan, we really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being with us. So tell our audience where they can find you and how they can connect with you.
Sure. Keyser.com, KEYSER.com is the easiest way. You can learn about all of us and all of our things there. And if anybody wants to email me directly, my personal email is jk@keyser.com.
And where can they get your book?
They could get it on Amazon. Again, it's called You Don't Have to Be Ruthless to Win. We also set up a website for the book. It's called ruthlessbook.com. Either way works. But again, it's designed to be something where you as a business leader, you as an entrepreneur, you as someone who wants to affect big change in the world can read it and get immediate takeaways on how you can start putting these principles into practice.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for being with us, and hopefully we can do it again.
So that sounds like a plan. Thanks for all you do.
All right, Jonathan. We'll see you later. All right, with that, everybody, that is our show for the week. Make sure to join us next week. Every Tuesday, we'll be live. We'll see you next week.
Have a good day, everyone.